Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. It's called Client Portals Are Not Rocket Science, Are They? It's all about building client portals for asset and wealth managers and our experiences, the best practices that we can bring. We don't think that client portals are rocket science, but they can really prepare your customer experience. Throughout this webinar, I'm going to use a few quotes, a few examples from rocket science itself. And I hope that is going to serve to illustrate the difference between the two. I do promise you, no billionaires will be mentioned or their childish expeditions. As we start, a few words about me. My name is Theo Paraskevopoulos. I'm Chief Executive at Grow Create. We are an agency on the intersection of cloud technology and customer experience. We have got an intense focus in investment management. And a few years ago, we decided to distill all our knowledge that we gained from building multiple client portals into a product that we called Invest, for which I'm a product owner. And having built and kept banging on about client portals all this time, you can call me Captain Portal, everybody else does. A few words about our journey today. We're going to make the business case for client portals, why they're important. We're going to debunk a few common myths and misconceptions. We're going to discuss best practices and approaches for client portals and the way that we see them, and then go through a few practical first steps to get you going if you're going to start on a project to commission either a new or an upgraded client portals. Finally, hopefully, we should have a little bit of time at the end for your questions. So let's start in the beginning. Why are client portals so important? Before we start, 7 years before the moon landing in the field of rocket science, JFK said this: why do we choose to go? We choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Because this goal will serve to measure the best. Similarly, and hopefully after you go through a client portal project, you will be saying something like a client from a London-based wealth manager said a while ago, a portal is something that clients can touch and feel, a great way to share the experience of working with us. This is all to say that digital is important, first of all, to your clients. All these benefits are things that your clients want from a client portal. They want to eliminate administration and paperwork. They want transparent access to the portfolio, account management that happens automatically and through a self-service model, communications with their advisors, and all this happening within an engaging, interactive experience. They want security for the data, and of course, they want long-term engagement with you, with their asset or wealth manager. The beauty of a client portal is that all these benefits correspond one-to-one with benefits for your company. So this can really upgrade your business. So in the same way that clients want to remove admin, you want to remove admins. You want to control who has portfolio access. You want to expand your team's capacity without expanding the team. Stay close to your clients, keep them engaged, give them a secure and compliant experience, encourage loyalty and referrals from them. The industry research, obviously, there is lots of stats to support this quote. I pulled up a few of them over here. Some other include the 700% outperformance of customer experience leaders against laggards. The fact that 65% of clients prefer a client portal or app as a primary channel, all the way to the end of looking at the future that clients expect 7 to 10 times increase in how they engage in the digital channel. So customer experience matters. You knew that already, but digital customer experience and of course client portals matter the most. Let's move on to debunking some common myths that have to do with building client portals. What is it that we should watch out for? In the field of rocket science, a normal headache or a challenge is that if you don't launch the rocket at 7 miles per second, the rocket will not launch, it will not escape gravity, it will not go into space. That's a pretty damn hard thing to do. In client portals, your challenge might be that you find that your data is all over the place, that the product will take a while and cost a fortune. Sure, it is a challenge. I'm not saying that it is easy, but it is not rocket science. Let's pick this apart. Let's unpack it and see if we can attack its point one at a time. The first myth is that your data might be too complex. The origins of this come from closed monolithic architectures. I'm going to get a little bit technical over here, but not too much. In the diagram over here, you can see how everything is in this pink box. your database, where your data comes from, how it gets manipulated and delivered over to your client, all happens within this one big box of an application. The problem with this is that time goes by and things change. You need to introduce change, new data sources, etc. It's extremely hard to do so. Instead, what you need to opt for, the solution is an open API-driven architecture. What I'm illustrating over here is how we architect things at Invest. On the left are your data sources, CRMs, investment systems, SharePoints, and file repositories. In the middle is what we build for you. So we have got a custom-built data middleware whose job is to collect data from these sources, manipulate it so that it's all in a constant format, deliver it into the components that we have built for you, all the charts and tables, and then combine that to deliver a seamless web and mobile web experience. The key to this diagram are the green padlocks over here, which denote the secure API endpoints. The beauty of this open architecture is that if something changes here, if you introduce a new data source on the left, we don't have to go reinventing the wheel. In fact, the mechanisms are all in place for you to reach out and introduce a new data source with minimum fuss. As time goes by and the challenges associated with the complexity of data reduce greatly. So we strongly advocate this architecture. A second myth is that the project might take ages. And the origin of that myth is the waterfall dependency-driven approach. What I'm showing over here is a traditional project split into 4 phases: planning, development, integration, testing, and release. And say, if the project is scheduled to run over 4 months, halfway through February over here, integration, like it usually does, there is a delay. Therefore, the dependency all gets thrown out of kilter. The timetable becomes completely unpredictable, and nobody knows when the release is going to be. And this is a typical scenario with these waterfall dependency-driven approaches. What we always advocate is to use a release-driven approach that is typically associated with what you recognize as an agile project. In an agile project, you have got these build cycles, each box over here, which has got its own plan, build, test, release tasks, and they've come following one another, and they are split into different phases in your roadmap. In the example I have got here, 4 sprints in, the same amount of time as our waterfall project. We are halfway through going to beta, but we have already achieved an MVP. We already have something to release. We already have created a bit of a momentum. Therefore, when we want to reach this full coverage over here for the full launch, if you like, of your client base, before we move to enhancements, we have got that momentum behind us. Similarly, if change comes in, if one of the dependencies introduces a delay, then we know to adapt our scheduling and being able to kind of repurpose resources onto where they can actually be used immediately. The third myth here I want to tackle is that the cost will be very high. The origin of this myth is from when companies used to build things from scratch. In my mind, this is discounting what I call the learning curve premium. Basically, being overconfident that you can start from scratch and not incur extra costs because of that. So if you were to build a client portal with DIY, with a do-it-yourself budget, you might budget this much for app integrations and maintenance, and you say, okay, that falls within my budget. The actual cost, however, taking into account the learning curve premium, might expand the application build significantly, because you're building from scratch, you're reinventing the wheel. Then the integrations always go further, and then the maintenance, of course, is usually more than you kind of think. All of a sudden, your budget has expanded out to a much higher, much bigger number. A solution to this is to use a SaaS vendor like Invest, because we have been building client portals forever now. This application, the application build is a lot faster. We already have the components. We have the visualizations, the security modules, everything that you need to get started. The integrations, we have got significant experience, and we also have got tools for data management to bring that to size. And also because you get to share resources between other clients in terms of cloud and maintenance and support desk with other organizations, that maintenance bill goes down. And this is our way of saying that you can achieve a lot more with less if you go to a SaaS vendor such as Invest. Having discussed the common pitfalls, let's talk about best practices. What is it that we're aiming for? Now, In rocket science, the objective is quite hard. After launch, the rocket should keep on going for 13 billion miles. That's the end of the solar system, and if possible, beyond that. In client portals, we summarize the objective as get the right data to the right person at the right time at the right device. Again, it's challenging. It is not rocket science. Let's unpack it again. What are the right persons? Now, it's not obviously the primary client you might be thinking of is the account owner, and they need portfolio access. However, you also need to think about everyone else. You think about beneficiaries who might have limited access. In institutional and B2B investments, you might have analysts who need access to the data so they can manipulate them for the reports. You have got your own advisors that they will want multi-client access in order to support the people that they're working with. Now, having identified the people that you need to work with, the next thing to do is to go a little bit deeper. For each one of these personas, what they call them, these user types, you need to go deeper. And actually what we do over here is we give them a name and a photo. We give them a demographic identity, an age, location, what are the assets under management, and then also a profile. In this case, this lady, Jane Benson, she has got a fairly high risk profile, high engagement, high technology attitude, but her market sentiment might be a little bit defensive. You put that all in the hopper, and you might ascertain here that her needs are for transparency, full access, probably mobile first, being so technology, such a tech enthusiast, but also here, you would identify that Jane here would be your power user. She could potentially be your beta tester for when you launch new features, or a user that you can listen out for when you want to figure out what you're going to do next. Now, we went a little deeper on this customer over here, but of course you need to repeat this process for each user in your that you need to work with. The next thing to talk about is what are the right times that you need to deliver the data. And a useful framework that we have for describing that splits the times into these 550 segments. 5 seconds, 50 seconds, 5 minutes, 50 minutes. Now, these are not exact timings, of course, but it's useful to think along those lines. For example, once a day, driven by habit, Jane over here might have a glance at her portfolio just to check out the market value. Perhaps she's reading the paper and it's response to something that she's reading over there. Maybe once a week, she'll spend almost a minute logging in, getting a little bit of a reassurance, having a look on her performance, her holdings, etc. Once a month, she wants to exercise some control over her account. It might take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, to act on her accounts, to send a few messages, exchange messages with her advisor, complete some forms, things like that. And of course, we also need to anticipate the fact that every quarter or every year, she needs to do her own due diligence, so to speak, to verify that things are going in the correct direction, at which point she needs access to all the data sets, all the tools. She might need to download data, look into the library for tax statements, for her tax return, etc. It is important to say over here that although Jane here or any of your users will spend most of the time kind of pinging into that 5-second use case, we must also give her the tools for her to do all the advanced functionality in the explore phase, and all that without obscuring the functionality on the left. Finally, these right times are associated with different devices. The glance functionality or the glance use case might actually be on the phone, or it might be on her watch as a notification. The check user case will probably be on the phone, take about a minute, and then the other 2 more advanced cases will probably happen on a desktop. It is important to say over here that as we enable different devices, not one device can have exclusive access to any functionality. As you bring in new features, you need to be able to bring them along all devices. Let's have a look to make things a little bit more real. Let's have a look at how we handle things at Invest. To give you an example of how things might look for Jane, I'm going to log into the application over here on my phone. Now, the application is running on the phone over here, and Jane comes in, gets a notification, comes in, checks in the market value, and off she goes. That's your 5-second scenario. The 50-second scenario might take her in, scrolling down a little bit, having a look at the performance, potentially having a little drill down into one of the portfolios, taking in a few holdings perhaps, and then coming back in. She'll probably play around over here and then move on. Now, the more advanced use cases are probably, or the advanced as in terms more time that she spends on the client portal, will probably have her logging into the desktop. And you can see how we have got complete feature parity between the mobile and the desktop over here. She's logged into the browser and she can see the same application. She will take in things like the performance, find in one of her portfolios and drill all the way down. There will be over here breakdowns on different currencies, asset classes, or region. It will give her a chance to explore individual holdings, have a look at the transactions. Once a year, once she does on her due diligence, she might kind of look to download data. She might into alternative visualizations. She might go over to account management functions, go into her document library to download documents and statements. She will take in things like the news over here, potentially if you have got any videos and thought leadership for her, and then being able to respond to these potentially by raising trade requests, etc. So different times would call for very different tools. It is important over here to highlight once more that as we cater for the more lengthy use cases in the exploration phase, we do not obscure or make the simpler ones more difficult. So we need to put that big number, the market value, in the very beginning, when you give her easy access to her portfolio for her to be able to do drill downs. So this drill down functionality is how our approach is to enable this best practice. Let's go back over here to our presentation, and we can take many more questions about our demo later on. Moving on to the fourth part, which is how do we budget for this? What are the practical first steps? In the field of rocket science, you launch a rocket and you need to budget $24,000 per kilo. Now, if you want to save money, do you slim down the rocket or do you slim down the payload? That's a really hard budgeting question. In contrast, when you're budgeting for Client Portal, you need a big enough budget to include all the features that clients need, but small enough budget for management to approve. Basically, you don't want to ask for such a big budget that will make it impossible to prove return on investment. Again, it is a challenge, but it is not one that is rocket science level. To help you, the first question that you might ask when you're embarking on the project might be, what should we budget for this? To help you out with this, I've raised 4 different questions, which is what we use roughly when we try to set a proposal in response to a brief. The first one is, how complex is your data landscape? How many systems do you need to integrate? How many of them are legacy? Are they modern? Are they not? And what data do you need to bring in? That is probably the primary way to ascertain the budget you will need. Every single system will introduce a level of complexity and therefore a level of additional budget. How far do you want to push the user experience? For example, if you were to stay within this user experience and then just customize it with the fonts and colors and logos, that's a simple enough project. If you wanted to customize it more deeply or to pull it apart and bring it together again to create a completely unique experience, that of course is a completely different level. It is important to say over here that the system that you choose to do this should be able to support it, but it should also allow you to start with something that is ready-made and turnkey, and then perhaps build on that. How unique is your business? Over here, I crossed out unique and made it unusual because we're talking about budgeting. Everyone's business, every asset and wealth manager is a unique business. However, if you think of it as unusual, then you also need to kind of think about the complexity changes and therefore the budget. Now, if your requirements are typical for the industry, then that is relatively standard budget. If you see yourself as a disruptor and you are selling unprecedented products to completely new segment of the market, that of course has got different repercussions. And finally, how large is your client base? That is needed in order to ascertain how the level of support and cloud resources that you need. The good news here is that technology has your back. There are economies of scale. So as you grow your client base, then the fractional cost for supporting each user diminishes. The next thing to do is to write a brief. And on that, potentially you can use the structure of this webinar to help you out. So the first thing that we like to see when we see briefs is what is the ambition? And for that, you can use inspiration from chapter 1 in the webinar when we talked about the business case. Maybe it's client retention. Maybe it is about increasing the efficiency of your advisors. But what is the ambition? Then we want to know what are the challenges. And for that, you can refer to chapter 2 of this webinar. What is your data landscape? Do you have any legacy systems? Are there any resource limitations we need or are constraints that we need to take into account? The third one is the most important for us as client experience people, which is what do your clients need? And for that, you can refer to the best practices chapter. What are your clients? What are the journeys? And what devices do we need to support? And finally, what is it that you're looking for? And for that, you can refer to this chapter. What is your budget on the previous slide? What are your vendor selection criteria? And that kind of thing would kind of help us determine also what it is that we need to propose and also how far we can push the proposal for you. Finally, we think that you need to select the right vendor. And these are a few things that you need to watch out for. Do they understand my business? We hope that when I touch on the business case on the chapter 1, we showed you what understanding the business looks like. The fact that you can have that win-win relationship between what your business needs and what your clients need. Does the vendor have the right experience? Do they know, have they created enough portals to know where the common pitfalls are and how to make sure that they mitigate those risks? Will the result be a proper and full upgrade of your business? Does the vendor know the best practices and how to design for it? And finally, do they make it as easy for you as Invest? Plugging in our own system over here, do they have a webinar that shows you that it is obviously the challenges are there and we are aware of them, but they're not rocket science. I'd like to finish over here by giving you the ambition of rocket science. Rocket science aims to locate extraterrestrial life or a planet where we could someday live. That's not so hard, is it? The client portal equivalent ambition is to deliver great service, to build trust and long-lasting client relationships. From where we stand, this is nothing short of epic. Thank you very much for your time. That was the presentation for today. I would like to kind of see if you guys have asked any questions over here that we can address on the call, as we do have a little bit of time. I do have some questions that came in earlier on, so I'm just gonna address this, and feel free to write any other questions on the chat. The first one is reporting is one thing, but should we support the client across the life cycle? Yes, it's a very, very good question. On this webinar, I focus very much on the client, on the reporting side of things. The onboarding side of the onboarding functionality is very important. So before you even get into the 5 seconds, 50 seconds, etc. Reporting use cases, you get into the onboarding one. And in fact, Invest is now onboarding a partner that will help us on and streamline the KYC functionality. We already have integrations with e-signature systems. So the whole idea is that this sometimes cumbersome process, which is onboarding, then we try to make it as simple as possible. If you do have any questions on that, if you want to go deeper, please do let me know. And one more question that came over here, which was, do you have an average price for a client portal? It's a very good question, and I suspect that this might have been posed by somebody in my team to make my life difficult, because they know that I cannot answer it quite outright, but I will do my best. I would probably say that the average price is in the 5 figures, whether it is euros or pounds. Of course, we have got some projects that are, at least on the onboarding, very small, because requirements are very basic. It's just maybe one data source, just very simple UX. So the price can be very small. We do have some enterprise level portals that go well beyond the 6 figures, because the complexity of the systems, different people involved, make it so. However, if you're starting on an upgrade or a new client portal project now, looking to average on halfway on the 5 figures is probably a good guiding point. Let me see if any other questions. How quickly can we get to an MVP? First of all, we start with a proof of concept stage, and that is an important thing to say, that we want to make sure that we can reach out and get all the data and produce an entry-level portal within 5 days. And at that point, on any project that we build, it can stop here if it doesn't work. So that will give you the reassurance that the project is technically feasible and that the relationship, the collaboration will work. Other than that, if the data is all correct, technically we can reach an MVP within a few weeks, and then start discussing the rest of the implementation. How we manage a goodwill to the customer experience if I already have the competitors in the market. I'm sorry, I did not fully understand the questions, but I'll try to unpack it. Already have the competitors in the market. I'm sorry, I did not fully understand that, but I can talk a little bit about competition over here. So we think that it is a benchmark by now. So if you do work for an asset and wealth manager, having a client portal is as important as having a website. It's like you don't talk about it anymore. It's baseline customer experience. Your competitors will have a client portal in the market, and if they do, they're probably building one. So we think it's extremely important. We think that this was the case even before the pandemic, but of course this trend of digital first customer experience and client servicing was completely accelerated, and by now I do believe that it is completely expected of you from the clients. I imagine that when people want to onboard as a new account, they might actually say, where is your portal? What does it look like? It becomes a brand threshold and a very important sales tool. Okay. You're talking about the building costs, but are the operating costs dependent on? Is customer support included in operating? Absolutely. That is a very, very important question. The operating cost was what I mentioned, was what I described as maintenance earlier when I had the bucket about maintenance, and of course it's important for total cost of ownership. This is important for Invest, for example. It was an important reason why we designed it as a software as a service solution, fully managed, which means that the subscription cost includes all the hosting, all the support, all the licenses that you would need, and therefore the operating costs, at least from the portal perspective, are covered from within your subscription model. It is extremely important to budget for these operating costs. It can be the blind spot of many IT projects to factor in what goes on after the launch. In fact, and going back to rocket science, we see a launch as the beginning of the process, most definitely not the end. Okay. I don't see any other questions. I do hope that you enjoyed the presentation today. If you do have more questions, please reach out to myself or Paulina. We will make the slides available to everyone who joined here and on our website. There will also be the same thing with the video recording of this webinar. And do refer to our website. There is a number of blog posts that cover some of the items that we talked about here in more detail. Thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye.